Cognitive learning is learning via association. Operant conditioning is learning via consequences. Cognitive learning is learning via developing mental representations. In this Unit 5.3, we'll talk about three different kinds of cognitive learning. First, we'll talk about insight learning, then about latent learning, and lastly, the observational learning. Have you ever experienced a situation where you ponder over a problem so long that you suddenly realize a solution to it from nowhere? Well, it does not come from nowhere. You need to have spent a lot of time thinking about a problem, so much so that you automatically restructure the problem and realize a solution. An aha moment. This is insight learning. Kohler worked with a chimpanzee named Sultan and observed that Sultan seemed to develop an insight into the problem before solving it. After putting Sultan in a cage, Kohler would place bananas outside the cage. When the chimp tries to reach the bananas, Kohler would move the food away. The bananas would be too far to reach with one stick. Chimp would need to connect two sticks to get to the bananas. Kohler observed that after multiple failed attempts to reach to the food with one stick, Chimp would sit in a corner, probably contemplating, and after some thinking, Sultan would suddenly realize a solution. And the solution to the problem is to connect the two sticks. How do you think Sultan worked this problem out? Well, Sultan most likely restructured the problem in his head. Insight learning is learning to mentally work through a problem until the sudden realization of a solution occurs. It's a process of mentally working through a problem. Have you experienced or have you ever experienced insight learning? Well, another example of cognitive learning is latent learning. Latent learning is also referred to as hidden learning. Hidden learning occurs without apparent reinforcement. In a classic study by Tolman and Hanzik, rats were trained to run through a maze. Researchers reinforced one group of rats, let's say group A, each time they ran through the maze, and they never reinforced another group of rats, say group B. Tolman examined how well the rats learned by measuring the number of errors they made each day. Guess what happened? As you can see, group A performed better than group B. The reinforced rats made fewer errors when compared to the never reinforced rats. In other words, reinforcement enhanced learning. The question Tolman asked was, did the unreinforced rats in group B, never learn anything? To answer this question about whether or not the unreinforced rats ever learned, Tolman selected a few rats from group B, the never reinforced group, and reinforced them on day 11. Then Tolman compared the errors made by groups A, B, and the new group that would be represented as an orange line in the next slide. As you can see, the newly reinforced rats in group C, they actually performed better than the other two groups, as the error rate drops for the orange one more than group A that was always reinforced and group B that was never reinforced, suggesting that the rats in group B, all the rats, in fact, learned anyways. In other words, all rats, irrespective of reinforcement, learned to run through the maze. They exhibited the learned behavior, however, only when the rats were reinforced. Tolman suggested that rats had developed cognitive maps or cognitive representations of the map of the maze, but they did not perform the learned response until the behavior was reinforced. Observational learning is learning by observing others. It is also called modeling or vicarious learning. Psychologist Albert Bandura, who proposed the social cognitive theory, investigated observational learning. In his popular Bobo doll experiments, one group of children would observe an adult interacting violently with the doll named Bobo, while the other group would watch regular interactions. Bandura found that children who watched the violent interactions repeated the violent behavior more than the group that watched regular interactions. In fact, this is the basis for the idea that watching violence on TV is actually harmful for the kids because they observe this by learning others. In fact, the influence of modeling is generally stronger when the model is similar to the learner and when the model's behavior is reinforced